Welcome to the Mama Bear Family Care Mastermind Summit. I'm Sherilyn and I'll be hosting the summit. Today we'll be talking to Jan Allegretti, who is trained in veterinary homeopathy and has more than 30 years experience as a consultant in holistic healthcare for non-human animals and more than 35 years as an advocate for compassionate care for all species. She is an author. Her latest book is The Fresh and Flexible Meal Plan, the easiest, most nutritious way to feed your dog and cat. Her other books are The Complete Holistic Dog Book, Home Health Care for Our Canine Companions, and Listen to the Silence, Lessons from Trees and Other Masters. Right. So how does this work for cats? Because I know that we've all heard, the term obligate carnivores. We know that dogs are more omnivores because they'll eat whatever pretty much. They can do fine with fruits and vegetables and grains. Even in the wild, they eat some of those things, grass, etc. Even a wolf will. But how does that work for cats?
You're right. Cats, unlike dogs, cats are carnivores. And they do require certain ingredients or certain nutrients, as you said earlier. But they can do very well on a vegan diet if they have proper supplementation. There's an easy way to do that, but it is about it's about providing them with what they need to the right amino acids and so on that they can get from plants, and the supplementation. There's a really excellent company that makes supplements for vegan dogs and cats. That's all they do, and so they've developed the formulas that are necessary. They do make a formula for dogs, and that's available, and it can be, a resource for people to use. I don't find it to be absolutely necessary for dogs, but it is necessary for cats. And there are other ways to do it. You could provide a number of supplements that the cats need to get everything they need on a vegan diet. But it's just much safer to go to the company who's already done all the research for you and has the right balance of nutrients. So the company is called Compassion Circle, and they're online, compassioncircle.com, and they provide a supplement that provides you a safe way to feed this fresh and flexible way for dogs and cats. There are a lot of other details about the approach too that I think are very, very helpful, and I think is important. Of course, we can't really address a whole new way of thinking about feeding and sewing and just in a short conversation like this, but there is a lot more information in the book. But again, basically it comes down to fresh whole foods, lots and lots of variety, and then watch your animal and see how they adapt and then modify it according to what they show you. But for the cats, that supplement is really the key to finding a way to do it safely.
Okay, thank you. And can you tell us a couple of examples of cats that you've known that have done this and how that worked out for them?
Sure. I'll tell you about one of the reasons that I started doing this was for my own cat who had severe allergies. She was a long-haired calico, beautiful cat, very much the princess. But she had allergies, and this was long time ago. I was feeding her some kind of, I think it was a Friskies, and they were those kind of chewy nuggets of cat food that you buy in a pouch.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know any better, I mean, I didn't know the difference between good and bad cat food. So
Yeah.
that's what she had, and she didn't do well on it at all. It probably had propylene glycol in it or something to give it that gummy texture for petroleum in it. But anyway, she didn't do well on that. So I changed her cat food, and I went through several cycles. I would change her cat food, and she would do better for a while. But then she would each time she would get to where she would eat a little bit of food, and then she would scratch and itch and run around the apartment and be very distressed and uncomfortable and lick herself and clearly be unhappy. So I went through several cycles of feeding different cat food, and we always got back to the same thing. Pretty soon, there was no cat food I could give her that would solve the problem. I switched her to fresh food, and she did better, but it wasn't completely, she still had some problems with it. I was feeding her meat. I think I was giving her mostly tuna or something like that. But then I ended up switching her to a vegetarian diet, and that was the end of the allergies. She didn't have any more allergies at all after that. So there was
Wow.
something in the animal protein that even as a cat, that was causing a problem for her. And so she was largely responsible for taking my first step down this path to feeding this way.
Wow. And so did she require supplementation on the vegetarians? Because that would include like eggs or dairy, maybe also.
I was giving her dairy and eggs. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
can cats get what they need, as whatever that specific thing that cats need? Can they get that from animal products that aren't necessarily meat, like something that a vegetarian might eat but a vegan wouldn't?
Generally, they can. I do think it's a good idea to include the compassion circle. It depends on how much you're doing. And if they're eating primarily lots and lots of eggs and cheese and that sort of thing, they probably can do all right on that. But if they're only getting a small amount of those, then it's probably a good idea to use some of the the supplement for vegan cats.
Okay.
And the people at Compassion Circle are wonderful to work with too. For people who have questions for feeding a modification of a vegan diet, with maybe a vegetarian diet, they're great for answering questions about those kinds of things too, depending on what particular needs are or how you want to feed, to really tailor it more to your needs.
Okay. Well, thank you. And so if someone in our audience is not vegan or vegetarian, how can they benefit to begin to make more holistic choices for the way they feed their companion animals? That because I know that the book is called Fresh and Flexible Meal Plan. So would that include, how would you work fresh food that might include animal products, at least at the beginning, for dogs and cats?
Yeah, and you're right. The book is not just a book about feeding a vegan diet. It really is about feeding fresh, whole foods with lots of variety, and feeding our dogs and cats the same way we feed ourselves, assuming we're eating a healthy diet to start with ourselves. But whether that includes meat or not, it's still the same principle. And so it's really just a matter of adapting whatever you feel comfortable eating yourself to feed those same foods for your dogs and cats. But it's about lots of variety. It's for all of us. We need to include lots of fruits and vegetables, because those are the superfoods, right? Those are where we get lots and lots of nutrient dense foods from the fruit and vegetable category. Well, the antioxidants and the phytonutrients and the anthocyanins and all those colorful components of that food that really gives us a lot of good nutrition. So we need a lot of that. So as long as you're incorporating those really good sound principles of nutrition, whether you're feeding meat or not, the same principles apply.
Okay, thank you. That sounds exciting, actually. It made me think of in one of, I think it was in the Fresh and Flexible Meal Plan book, you talked about the first meal that you gave your Great Dane when you finally got her home. It sounded so good to me. It sounded delicious. Like was it brown rice and lentils and broccoli? Is that right? With black soil on it?
Good. Yeah, you're right. You're right. Yeah, that was fun. She was, and I have pictures, I think they're on my website. I have to get them up there if they're not. That was Tila. I brought her home from, I went to I live in California. I drove to Denver to pick her up from Rocky Mountain Great Dane Rescue. And when I picked her up, she was skin and bones. She weighed about 106 pounds, I think. And she was very, very sick. They had been feeding her a pretty good quality, one of the better quality dog foods. And so I had a 4-day drive home and with her in the car. And so I just kept feeding her what they had been giving her till I got home. And she wasn't too interested in it. I had a hard time getting her to eat all the way home. And we got back here though, and the first meal at home was just, you say, rice and lentils and broccoli. And she dove into that bowl, licked it clean. She loved it, and they're, but that's, people are so often surprised. Oh my gosh, I gave my dog broccoli and he liked it. I can't believe it, But they do. They know what good food is. They love this stuff.
Yeah.
In fact, one of my favorite things is, and it still amazes me that most people are amazed that most dogs love sauerkraut.
Oh, wow.
One of the things I encourage people to do is feed fermented foods. I include in my program, I include a whole component of foods called nutrition boosters.
Oh,
And
okay.
those are things like that are really real superfoods, like spirulina and nutritional yeast and sprouts and fermented foods is on that list because we need those probiotics. They're really, really beneficial. But it's much better to get those probiotics from fermented foods rather than from a supplement. And so I encourage people to feed sauerkraut, and dogs
Wow.
love it. And most cats like it as well. It's amazing.
Oh, I had no idea. I would not have guessed
I
that.
know, it's amazing, isn't it? It's very
Yeah.
cool. It's really fun. The first time, and it amazes me every time. The first time you feed a dog or a cat sauerkraut and they love it, it's like, what do you know? It happened
That's
again.
so fun. Yeah, it's like their bodies must recognize how nutritious it is.
I think so. Yeah.
Wow. So are there any general principles or guidelines that people might be able to use to benefit from this approach if their companion animals or animals in their lives don't happen to be dogs or cats? Like, say, just general guidelines that might for whatever they might be, whether they're maybe chickens or goats or cows or horses, just some general principles.
Yeah, the basic principles are fresh whole foods, minimally processed. A lot of those foods, they typically we feed a pellet or some kind of a packaged, similar to kibble, but a pelleted food. And none of those animals would eat that in the wild, should we say?
Right.
And so if it's possible to transition to more whole foods, like for a horse, rather than feeding a pellet of some kind, feed actual hay, and feed, like real hay if they're able to chew it, and whole grains rather than the pelleted versions. And variety is the other part of it. Again, something different every day. In a lot of areas, again, using the horse as an example, or a goat or chickens or any one of them, there's only, there's a certain hay dealer in town, and you buy from the same hay dealer, and he may have a barn full of one kind of hay. You're going to feed that all season long. But again, if you can feed a variety of different grasses, that's going to be more like what a horse would do out grazing in the wild, to go from one area to another and eat all the different kinds of grasses that grow in the wild. So variety, again, is a component. It's trickier with some species. One thing to keep in mind is that dogs and cats and even horses less so because they're not in around our campfire or in our home so much. They have all evolved with us over tens of thousands of years. And so their digestive tracts are have evolved to digest the foods that we eat. Dogs have far more, have between 2 and 15 times as many genes for digesting starches than wolves do. Cats, their genetics hasn't changed as much, but they do digest carbohydrates. Most people don't realize that most commercial cat foods have a fair amount of grain in them, or some kind of carbohydrate food to help balance out the nutritional profiles. And so they have adapted to eat the same way we do. Many other species have not been integrated with our lifestyle to that extent. Rabbits or chickens or even goats, or hamsters. And so it is much more important. I would not, for any of those animals, recommend just feeding them what you eat yourself, because it probably would not be appropriate for them. And so it is very important to make sure you understand what the normal foods are for the species that you're feeding. And then within that framework, try to incorporate the variety. If a rabbit needs to eat hay, try to find out what different kinds of hay are beneficial for a rabbit and then feed those, that are available in your area and feed those.
Okay.
So variety is a big part of it, and fresh
Yeah.
whole foods are the basics. But
Okay.
from there, you need to bring that to your choice of which food categories you're going to choose that are appropriate for the species you're feeding.
I see. That makes sense. And the example that comes to my mind is one that you're probably going to hate, and I hate it too. But when I was a kid, I for some reason was interested in snakes, and so I wanted a
I
snake.
love it. I love it.
And so I think one of the things that turned me off was that you're supposed to feed some of them mice.
Yeah.
But just from like the trying to remember the big picture, and there's a lot of people out there in the audience who may have all kinds of different circumstances, and just with the general principle being and variety. So if, like you mentioned with the horses and with rabbits, maybe even if if they would normally in the wild eat one type of food, that doesn't mean like grass, for example, or hay. They would be moving around, so they would still get a variety even within that one general type. So that
Right.
makes me think of you really could apply that to just think of how they would be living
Right.
out on their own. And so, like, for example, where you mentioned the horses getting the hay from one store where it's the same supply all season, maybe finding different varieties instead. And so I was thinking, if it was a snake, for example, maybe getting different kinds of rodents, or like different, just like a different variety of fresh food sources.
You're right, and that's such an interesting question. It's I thought you were you were saying, oh, you probably don't want to talk about snakes, but I think snakes are great. But
Oh yeah.
yeah, I would probably wouldn't have one in my family because it would be hard for me. I would feel bad for the mice, but
Yeah.
that's what they need.
Yeah.
So yeah, but that's a great example. It would be a matter of, what other kinds of animals would that snake eat? Would they, and try to find a variety. I know I've seen articles or stories about people who buy, a pack, they have a package of 300 mice in their freezer because they have a
Oh
snake to feed or something, and if that's all the snake is going to eat all that time. So yeah,
yeah.
you're right. A variety is probably better.
Yeah. Well, thank you for
But
going
it's
there
got to
with
be
me.
species specific. And
Yeah.
as far as I know, I'm not aware of anybody trying to feed a snake on a vegan diet. It's probably possible because
Yeah.
if we talk about ingredients rather than nutrients, but I don't know that it's a good idea.
Yeah.
I'd
Yeah.
recommend
Yeah.
it. I would not
Interest.
recommend it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would
That's
more likely
interesting.
say if you're not comfortable feeding the mice, then probably choose a different companion for your family than the
Yes,
snakes.
that's what I did.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
snakes seem really cool, but I just couldn't do that every day. Or
Yeah.
however often you feed them. I just didn't
Yeah.
want to do that.
Yeah. I understand.
Jen has generously provided for a free gift for you all, and we'll have a link here on the page where you can access that free gift to get started right away with some of the things that she's been talking about. And Jen, can you let us know and let the audience know where they should go to find out more about your work?
Sure. My website is at holisticaha.com. Holistic AHA stands for Holistic Animal Health and Advocacy, but you don't have to type that all out. Just holisticaha.com.
And remember to check out Jan's books. Her latest book is The Fresh and Flexible Meal Plan, the easiest, most nutritious way to feed your dog and cat. Her other books are The Complete Holistic Dog Book, Home Health Care for Our Canine Companions, and Listen to the Silence, Lessons from Trees and Other Masters.